Okay, fair night and Christmas. We are in our Christmas Foretold series. This I am loving this. I have to. Sorry, pardon me if I would cough. I have been having
Both of us.
allergies and but yeah, it's been good. The prophetic word, right, from the Old Testament would be 4,000 years to now, and 2,000 years to Jesus' birth to the New Testament. Prophetic words and how it translates for us today. Isn't that encouraging, right? To see that happen, unfold as we go through that, dig into that word. And of course, week one, we discussed about the Genesis, the proto-evangelium, Genesis 3:15, the fall, the big mess up, as Robert coined it. But it was really the wooden heel crushed. But God, through Christmas, God has shown that there is hope and victory despite of that, right? And of course, in week two, last Sunday, we discussed the scepter and staff that God has, through Jesus, through His full authority and power, leadership and guidance. The Christmas birth, He has that. He's not just a baby in a manger, but really, He's the King who holds the scepter and staff. And tonight, we are gonna look at it again. The text, Genesis 49. We're gonna unpack the text and see lessons, what we can learn about the scripture. And let's jump right in, right? So, Genesis 49:10 says here, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff between his feet, and until the tribute comes to him, and to him will be the obedience of peoples. And of course, I mentioned this last Sunday, and I will repeat it again for those who haven't watched or joined us for the context of this. Of course, Genesis 49 actually speaks about Jacob, who's Israel at this time. He has 12 sons, and he's old, about 130, nearing his death. And he prophesied to his sons. He gave this prophetic blessing, and he gathered his sons to assemble. In Genesis 49, 1-2, it says here, then Jacob called his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I will tell you what shall happen to you in days to come. Right? So it's not just to him, to his son, but what will happen to the descendants, right, of their son. So as Jacob, in verse 2, it says, assemble and listen, O sons of Jacob, listen to Israel, your father. All right, so as Jacob prophesies to his sons, he will reveal a small part of future of each son's descendants, as I mentioned, and each son's family will become one of the tribes of Israel. So assemble. Right? So, of course, I mentioned the first three brothers, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, didn't receive a positive prophecy because of because of their actions before Jacob gave this prophecy. But when the time for Judah to receive the prophetic word from his father, it was a positive one. Right? Of course, could you imagine the three brothers ahead of you receiving that prophetic word, and then you would think that what about me? What will be? But Judah actually received this in verse 8-12. It would for verse 49 that he would be the tribe line of Judah, that he would be. It was a positive word. So Judah received this prophetic word, and the question is, what made him special compared to his brothers? Right? There are 12 brothers, but what made him special compared to his brothers? That it was in his lineage that the kings would come, because it was mentioned here in verse 49:10, right? The scepter should not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff, and that's what I mean. The lineage of kings would come from him, and this was what was mentioned in last Sunday's preaching, that it was shown, right? That from 2,000 years until Jesus' birth, that the lineage of it was fulfilled. Now, as we look into this, who is Judah? It's like, what was so special about Judah, right? So that's what we're going to look at. How did God use Judah in the fulfillment of the promised Messiah? Of course, this is Christmas Foretold, and the promised Messiah would be the topic, right? So, how did God use Judah is what we're going to answer tonight. So, how did God use Judah in the fulfillment of the promised Messiah? And what lessons, I have to say, what lessons can we learn from this prophetic message in the life and story of Judah? Because you have to understand that there's something so special about him. Right? For the four people, for the three older brothers, and him was a different one. So, number one, I'm going to share with you just two things tonight. Right? And number one would be, as we look in here, God can use imperfect people. And so God can use imperfect people. It says here, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. Right? That the lineage of kings would not depart from him. It was mentioned, later we'll see, Matthew 1 to 17 to 16. It was written by Matthew that it was there, the genealogy of that. So, but the scepter shall not depart from Judah. So the ruler stabbed between his feet. So now who's Judah, by the way, right? Mm-hmm. Now, who is Judah? That's one thing that we're going to answer first. So number one, first is that Judah actually sold his brother. Right? If we go back by the line of Judah, we'll see that he was actually an imperfect person. And so it's so special. You think like, oh wow, from the tribe of Judah. Like if you don't look back, if you go back when he was first mentioned, and he was actually an imperfect person. So he was actually instrumental in selling his brother. Mm-hmm. Could you imagine selling your brother? I mean, I know you have a brother, but think about that. A sibling. Mm-hmm. Judah, at this point, Judah is a person who will become a tribe, right? Mm-hmm. But at this point, when he was still talking about, when Jacob was talking to him, that he will become a tribe. But in Genesis 37, 26 to 27, it says here, then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother, right, and conceal his blood? It's kind of covering it with like nice package. But in verse 27, he just said, come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, right? And let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. So as you look at this, it's kind of a little bit noble, and I'll say, but of course Judah, if he would agree with me, he had an imperfect past, right? Because of this, that was the reason why the lineage of kings could come from him, because he was perfect. Well, based on this, clearly he's not, because he is part of that. And in this text, we see Judah being an accomplice. Yeah. He was an accomplice, right, to selling his brother. Right? While Judah urged his brothers not to kill his brother Joseph, he was still involved. He's still part of that. He's not like, okay, my conscience is clear. He was there, right? Selling him to the Ishmaelites, the brother. Regardless of like how jealousy was in Joseph. This is Joseph because he's the favorite, right? So we know that. To look at that, you see, yeah, but that's your sibling, your king. Judah betrayed his brother Joseph. If you look at the eyes, you can imagine the moment that he was seeing that his brother being taken away, being sold.
Not knowing what's going to happen.
Not knowing, true. Yeah. He was imperfect. So, who was Judah? An imperfect person, if you would agree. Right? Yeah. So, anything you want to share before? I need to take this. I'm having something.
No, I think, you know how sometimes we take part in something. It's so messed up. When we read that story about Joseph, right? It really is for me, like a messed up story. Like how you take part into something that you would regret later on, right? But then again, no amount of justification or excuse really would suffice to say that, well, at least we didn't kill him, right? Or at least he's still alive, or at least. Because at the end of it, they committed a grave sin of really selling their brother. Yeah, I mean that's...
He sold his brother.
Yeah, I mean... I could not fathom,
Yeah.
you know, out of jealousy to get rid of your brother and, you know, not knowing what could have happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
And aside from that, and then facing your father telling him something else, right? So that's
Yes.
another story, but just imagine that kind of guilt that you're gonna be carrying because you know that you are part of it.
Yes.
Mhm.
So he was imperfect. But that was, you would think, like, okay, he did that. Maybe that's the last.
Mhm.
You know, maybe it's not as grave as, you know, that would be the worst.
Yeah.
The worst,
Mhm.
right? But actually, if you jump into, this is Genesis 37. The Genesis, of course, is so jam-packed, right? You have to go back and look at, read this, the narrative, you see this. But in verse 38, we're going to jump into verse 38. But you know, not just that, he sold his brother, right? And he also failed his responsibility as a father-in-law. Why and how? If you jump into it, on one other occasion, Judah failed in his responsibilities as a father-in-law, leading to a shameful situation where Tamar's daughter-in-law, his daughter-in-law, disguised herself as a prostitute to secure her rights. Because the sons died because they were evil. Judah's sons were died, and now he was deceived. And we can see here in Genesis 38, 25 to 26. So he's not so perfect, right? So as she was being brought out in verse 25 to 26, she sent word to her father-in-law, by the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. So she disguised herself as a prostitute to gain, to secure her rights, right? And she said, please identify whose these are. The signet, the cord, and the staff. Actually, this three, Judah gave it to the prostitute, right? Because he doesn't have a goat. The goat was supposed to be the payment, but since he doesn't have one, so he just gave that. So there's no for sure. So he was tricked in a way. So then Judah identified them and said, she is a more righteous person than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelos, supposed to be the promised husband for him. And he did not know her again, meaning like he did not sleep with her again. So, but she got, actually Judah and Tamar, Tamar got pregnant and had twins actually. So would you agree with me that Judah was imperfect? Failed being as a responsible father-in-law, sold his brother. You see that. You would think that, oh, because he was part of the he's part of the 12 tribes, that for sure this one is and he is the highest, would be among the everyone, right? Most likely he's the most righteous person, right? But on this text, it's not. Yeah, so that's urgent. Don't look at it first as a tribe. This is just a person at this point when we're looking at it.
It's like one mess after another.
I agree. Sorry. All right, so my apologies. So sometimes we think because of our past, because of our imperfections, we may already disqualify ourselves from coming to God. Maybe you can say something like that if you look at this. So Judah, I have just two things to share with you. But the first one, of course, you have to understand that God can use imperfect people. But does that mean, I can go, that means, I'm imperfect, which means I can continue serving and while going sinning. No, this is actually our number two. Our second point is, God uses imperfect people that have been changed by Him. Changed by Him. So where did we get this? Actually, so this is verse 38. And now we jump in chapter 38. Right? Now jumping to chapter 44, in verse 30, Judah and his brothers went to buy. Remember the time when there was a famine, and then they had to go to Egypt, and then after that, they finally they saw Joseph. Then Joseph saw the brothers, and it was,
Joseph saw them first,
Joseph
but
saw
did
them,
not
but
reveal.
did
Yeah,
not-
but
yes.
did not reveal himself.
Yes, this
first.
was his story.
Mhm.
God, because there was, you would see, and on my second point,
Mhm.
that there was change, that Judah was changed, right, during this time. Now, in the whole, so there was famine, and of course, Joseph tested his brothers, right? Remember, he gave each sack, they got everything, and then he wanted to see his father and Benjamin, of course, the beloved of Joseph, and then had to test him, and then at this point, he tested him by putting a silver cup, remember that? So there was, and then now the people who, the brothers who were about to go, they were going back to their father, and now the people of Egypt, the soldiers, they went after, and then of course it was a test, right? So
And they found the cup in Benjamin's.
they found the cup in Benjamin's. Now you like your flying house in Super Bowl, so that's what happened, and of course.
But it was a setup.
It was a setup all along, yes. So that's what happened. God uses imperfect people that have been changed by Him. You could see the narrative, the discussion of between Joseph and who Judah at that point doesn't know that he's the brother yet. He was telling, he was telling him that he was a servant, and then from verse 19 up to this one, it was just a dialogue of him saying his piece regarding his brother and his father is about to die, and something like that. And of course, it says here in jumping in Genesis 44:33, now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. So there was a change. I don't know, it could be, it's just me and based on how I studied and looked at it. Most likely when he saw Joseph being sold, then there's like, it's not gonna happen again. Right? Most likely there's a change. God can use imperfect people, but there should be change. The changed by God had this encounter, right? So Judah, actually what happened here, he demonstrated a sacrificial act. Because he didn't know what is going to happen. He could have, he doesn't know that this Joseph was the brother, right? So he could have been killed, right? Don't know what happened. So, but Judah demonstrated a sacrificial act by offering himself as a substitute for Benjamin. Right? So showing love, showing growth, humility, responsibility, ownership. I'm reading this and I'm actually intrigued because not one brother spoke aside from him. So interesting. I may be wrong, but there's the whole narrative is just Judah, so defending. So there's how many brothers were there?
10.
10.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a trick question? So we realize, so it shows here, right? There's change. Now, imperfect people, God uses imperfect people that have been changed by Him. So it'd be because of obedience, right? So it could be realized that his past actions made up for the wrong things he had done, like I mentioned earlier. But still, he was flawed and imperfect. Of course, he's still imperfect. Despite Judah's imperfections, when he made the change of heart in Genesis 44, it was used to accomplish God's purpose in his life. He made this decision that it's about obedience. You have to make a stand. Yes, you are imperfect, but you have to make a decision to obey. At some point, yes, you're imperfect, but that doesn't give you an excuse to keep on doing what that's not pleasing to the Lord. Right? So God uses imperfect people that have been changed by Him. So now, looking at Matthew's account, that was in the Old Testament, right? Fulfillment, because it's Christmas foretold, right? Looking at Matthew's account, we see the genealogy, right? In Matthew 1:1, remember that? We showed that. So the book of genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham, we see the son of Abraham, the father of Isaac, to Jacob, Israel, right, the father of Judah. That the prophecy was fulfilled. And what's interesting here, we go on as we move on to verse 2 to 3. If you don't have your Bibles with you, you could go ahead and read later on. But it says here in verse 2 and 3, Abraham was the father of Isaac and the father of Jacob, the father of Judah and his brothers. And look at this, verse 3. Judah, the father of who? Perez and Zerah by Tamar. So who's that? The son of the kids of Judah by Tamar. Right? So it was listed there. These were imperfect people, but God used them still because of their obedience, right, to Him. And of course, these people were imperfect, but but they made the decision to obey the Lord. You know, even in Judah's past with Tamar, the father-in-law, Judah's past didn't count him out. Yeah, and of course, in verse 1-3 it says there, you can see there clearly, God said use Judah to fulfill His redemptive plan. So, and Judah, despite his failures and mistakes, is an example of God's grace and purpose. As you look into this genealogy, Abraham, he was a liar. Remember when Sarah? This was Abraham first, but that's time. He was a liar. You think the father of faith, right? So, look at that. So saying here, lied to for David, who was in this genealogy. Look at this, a murderer. Solomon worshipped other gods. And go on, and all the kings that were. I believe Pastor Tito actually preached that powerful message, sharing about the kings who have all their flaws. As you look into this, there's no perfect. Actually, it's in verse there. There are 4 there who were listed who were not Jews. You can see this were talking the. I listed it here. So, but all in all, there are 14 to the generations. There are 14 generations, and there are 42 generations in all. 42 imperfect. Again, God can use imperfect people. You know, God can use imperfect people that has been changed by God.
God can use imperfect people that has been changed by Him. And for me, that's the word I underline here, because the transformation only comes from the Lord. That we are, God is only able to use us if we are willing to be transformed. Because sometimes we think, yeah, I can change myself. When you have not just bad habits or vice, sometimes we have this thinking, it's okay, I can always stop, or I can change myself. But really, we do not have the power to change ourselves. It's only through God. And when we acknowledge that as on our own we cannot, then that's where His power comes. That's where He empowers us and transforms us to be more like Jesus.
Yes, and actually later, that's the whole essence of Christmas. So reminder, right? So, how about you guys? Feel free to comment what's your take on this point too, right? So, you look into this. So, no matter what mistakes you've made, when you come to God in repentance, you come really, truly, 100%, God can still use you. Can still use you. You can see this all imperfect. This just highlights God's faithfulness, right? So,
and that's actually all of us.
Yes.
As I look at it, we all actually could relate to Judah, right? Because I remember the first week, right? About brokenness, about mess. We're all messed up. I mean, at one point in our lives, we have done things that we are not proud of. We have committed sin against God, and so when you look at it, yes, Judah was like this, David was like this, but when you shift the spotlight from them, right? Oh yeah, that's how they were. But when you shift the spotlight and point it to yourself, right? It really is about self-reflection, and when you look at that, then you realize, well, actually, I'm like that too.
Yes. So that's me as I was studying. Like, oh wow, Lord,
Imperfect,
so,
flawed,
so
sinful.
why you?
Yeah.
Why you? It's like you're pounding it. Yes, I know. Imperfect, flawed.
Yes. No, but it's true, right? It just hits home, really.
Yes, it hits home.
Because that's who we are.
Yes. Yes, I agree. That's why as I was studying immersive, that's really resonated in I am an imperfect person. And how could that be? Right? It could be used. But there's a starting point in this. You have to understand that there should be change and transformation. So everyone has a past. They might feel like it disqualifies them from God's blessings or calling. But you have to make it, because there should be a change. When we turn back to God, He redeems us. And God uses our transformation to accomplish His purposes in your life. So like Judah, you can grow, you can still change it, but God honors repentance and uses it for His glory, just like it happened in Judah. Now we don't know. Now when you jump into Genesis 49:10, we understand. There was change in his heart compared. If you focus on Judah, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, right? But of all the 12, but there was change in Judah's heart. That's why it was not an accident. Like, I couldn't name. Maybe he was old. Like, who's this fourth person? He was supposed to give it to his favorite. No, not to Joseph. This was so clear because God gave the word to Jacob. Right? So the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. And the tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of obedience. So all the people, David, Solomon, who you think like, if you are Judah the person, if he would know like, that David would come from
your lineage,
the lineage,
that's gonna come.
He doesn't know them.
Yeah.
Imagine that. David, Solomon, and Jesus Christ. That's so mind-blowing even to them. And Judah was imperfect, but Judah's decision to be transformed, to be changed by God, it resulted to this. That Jesus the King is the ultimate fulfillment of Judah's prophecy. Now that's encouraging, if you would agree with me, right? Jesus is the King. He is actually the shepherd king, right? Who holds a staff, also the scepter. Jesus came from Judah's line. It's actually Jesus, the source of redemption and hope for all. Jesus has come to redeem humanity. This is the ultimate steps. If you look at that in summary, this is what it's about. This is what it's all about. Isn't that encouraging? You are part of not Judas, just a small part, played a small part with Judas' decision. Saying yes to change. Played a key integral part to the lineage. Because of God's plan, that's all because of God's plan. And so, of course, you see there in Matthew 2, 11 tributes were given. Until tribute comes to him, that's what it's all about. Tributes were given to the king, sign of respect and honor. There's just proof that it was really Jesus born, and the wise men from the east came. Remember that Jerusalem worship him, giving him tributes, and of course, God's sovereign plan was revealed through Judah's lineage. Now, as I'm about to end. As we celebrate Christmas, let us remember that Jesus is the fulfillment of God's promise for us. And if you would think that Christmas foretold is Jesus has come to change imperfect people. He's come. Every time if you think of Christmas, remember that Jesus came to change our hearts, our imperfect. He's come to change our hearts. Left on our own, we couldn't change ours.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for a short period of time, but really to change your heart, attitude, mindset, perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That's why that's what Christmas is about. Well, how about you guys? What's your take? Anything you want to share before you come? As I drink first. So.
I like that in all that from Judah, from the prophecy, it all boils down to Jesus. That's really, and that's what Christmas is all about. That's what our series is all about. It's good to be reminded that our past, no matter how messed up it is, even now, that no matter how much of a mess we've made in our lives, could be from, bad decisions, disobedience, could be consequence of our actions or consequence of sin. It gives us so much hope, knowing that Jesus came, and that's why we celebrate this season, really, because he was born, and it doesn't stop there.
Yes. And we need a Messiah, we need a Savior. That's why he's like on our own, like what I mentioned, we couldn't, right? We couldn't change our hearts. We're imperfect people. So as I highlight this, you look at this, it's just amazed on how God has changed you. God has changed us, changed our hearts. And the challenge is how should we respond? As we celebrate and worship, like what was mentioned in the preaching last Sunday, is like we worship, we will give our reverence or awe to Him. We respond, our response will be obedience. Right? True. I mean, if Judah changed, who was what? His oldest brother, not the best father-in-law, not the best, but he changed. Judah changed. God can still change you. And God can change me. There's so many imperfections, like what you mentioned. But God can still change areas in my life. Just like if I'm some attitudes, characters in my life that is a challenge for me, I believe God can change because He is.
Yeah. I like this. I appreciate this series because it puts the focus, right? It puts the focus back to Jesus. Because during this season, especially Christmas, right? It's so easy to get swallowed by the busyness of the holidays, and what we get consumed by, not having finished, doing your Christmas shopping, the preparation and all that stuff, and the parties left and right. That and sometimes it's just Christmas, it's a festive, holiday, but really, do we really remember why we celebrated in the first place.
Yeah. To change our hearts. And I think that's one thing that's if there's a takeaway here. Imperfect people. Jesus came to change it. Imperfect people. To change the hearts. Right? So, yes. And that's actually our message this evening.